Football has a cruel habit of humbling the teams that look unbeatable. Not because they lack talent, not because they don't work hard, but because football has never been a game about collecting the best players. It's about making those players believe in the same idea. And no team proved that more than Portugal. Because coming into the 2026 World Cup, they didn't just have a good midfield. They had 4 players who had conquered Europe. Vitinha had just established himself as one of the finest midfielders in world football, helping his club win back-to-back Champions League titles while controlling games with remarkable composure. Alongside him was João Neves, another Champions League winner, a player whose relentless energy and maturity made him one of Europe's brightest young midfielders before he had even reached his peak. Then there was Bruno Fernandes, fresh off one of the greatest creative seasons the Premier League had ever seen, breaking Premier League all-time assist record. And finally, Bernardo Silva, a player who had spent years winning almost everything at club level, trusted in the biggest matches because of his intelligence, composure, and ability to dictate the rhythm of any game. 4 different players, 4 different strengths, one midfield that many believed was the finest in international football. For the first time in years, Portugal weren't entering a tournament as dark horses. They were entering as genuine favorites. And maybe that was the beginning of the problem. Football fans have always loved one thing: potential. We see talented players and immediately imagine the perfect team. We build Dream X's. We compare generations. We convince ourselves that if 11 world-class players wear the same shirt, success becomes inevitable. But football has never worked like that, because history isn't written by the most talented teams. It's written by the teams that understand each other. The greatest Barcelona side didn't dominate because Xavi, Iniesta, and Busquets were individually brilliant. They dominated because every movement had a purpose. Every pass created another pass. Every player understood exactly what the others were about to do. It looked effortless because it was built over years. Portugal never reached that point, and almost nobody noticed because they kept surviving. During qualification, Portugal looked unstoppable. Goals came easily. Possession numbers were incredible. The midfield controlled almost every game. The statistics painted the picture of a future champion. But statistics can lie, because controlling the ball isn't the same as controlling a football match. There were warning signs, small ones, the kind that only become obvious after you've already been eliminated. Portugal often dominated possession without dominating danger. They could pass around teams for minutes, but when it came to creating that one decisive moment, everything suddenly slowed down. The attacks became predictable, safe, almost rehearsed. It wasn't that Portugal were playing badly. They simply weren't hurting opponents enough. And against weaker nations, individual quality covered those cracks. The strange thing was, nobody questioned it. Why would they? Portugal were winning. The midfield looked beautiful. The football looked modern. The names on the team sheet were enough to convince everyone that this team was different. But football doesn't care about reputations. It exposes weaknesses eventually. And Portugal were about to discover that having the world's best midfield doesn't necessarily mean you have the world's best team. There was another reason expectations reached impossible levels. Cristiano Ronaldo. Whether you believed he should still start, or whether you thought Portugal had already entered a new era, one thing was undeniable. This would almost certainly be his final World Cup. For over 20 years, Portuguese football had revolved around one man. Generations had grown up watching him carry the hopes of an entire nation. Now, the script seemed almost too perfect. A legendary captain, the strongest midfield Portugal had ever assembled, a squad entering its prime, and one final opportunity to complete football's greatest farewell. It sounded like destiny. But football has never cared about fairy tales. Sometimes the ending you deserve isn't the ending you get. And one of the main problems was the man trying to make them all play together. Roberto Martínez. From the day he took over Portugal, his philosophy was obvious. Control the ball, dominate possession, be patient, wait for the right moment. On paper, it sounded perfect. After all, what better team to play possession football than one with Vitinha, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva and João Neves, some of the best technicians in world football. The idea made sense. The execution didn't. Portugal became a team obsessed with control. Every attack started from deep. Every possession was carefully recycled. Every pass prioritized security over risk. Against smaller nations, it looked beautiful. Portugal often finished games with overwhelming possession. Hundreds of completed passes. Very few moments of panic. But knockout football isn't played against teams that fear you. It's played against teams that wait for one mistake. And Portugal never seemed prepared for that reality. Because possession without penetration is just possession. Roberto Martínez inherited one of the deepest squads Portugal had ever produced. But instead of creating clear roles, he often trusted talent to solve problems. When matches became complicated, Portugal rarely changed. The tempo stayed the same. The build-up stayed the same. The shape stayed the same. Elite tournament football demands adaptation. The best managers recognize when a game has changed, sometimes before anyone else does. Martínez rarely did. The warning signs had been there long before Portugal were eliminated. There were matches where they dominated the ball, but produced very few clear chances. Matches where they looked comfortable, without ever looking dangerous. Matches where opponents seemed happy to let Portugal keep possession because they knew exactly where the attacks were going. Portugal became predictable, not because the players lacked imagination, but because the structure encouraged repetition. And in football, predictability is a gift to your opponent. And that's the irony. This squad had everything modern football demands: technical quality, depth, experience, youth, leaders, versatility. What they lacked was one clear identity. Because talent can win matches, identity wins tournaments. By the time Portugal reached the knockout stage, the cracks were no longer invisible. The beautiful football was still there. The possession was still there. The names were still there. But the feeling that this team was destined to become world champions, had quietly disappeared. And then, with 90 minutes separating Portugal from another World Cup dream, football delivered the ending nobody wanted. Not because Portugal lacked talent, but because talent alone has never been enough. There was something different about this World Cup. Not because Portugal were favorites, not because they had the strongest midfield in years, but because everyone knew this was the last time. For nearly a quarter of a century, Cristiano Ronaldo had carried the hopes of an entire nation. From the skinny teenager who announced himself at Euro 2004 to the captain who lifted Portugal's first major trophy in 2016, to becoming international football's all-time leading goal scorer. For millions of Portuguese fans, he wasn't just their greatest player, he was Portuguese football. And now, that story was coming to an end. Football is strange. Sometimes it gives legends the perfect ending. Sometimes it doesn't. This tournament never became Ronaldo's storybook farewell. Not because he stopped caring, not because the team lacked effort, but because football doesn't reward emotion, it rewards execution. And when the biggest moments arrived, Portugal couldn't find the answers. So, why did Portugal fail? Was it Roberto Martinez's tactical rigidity? Was it a midfield that never fully developed a shared identity? Was it the crushing weight of expectation? Or was it simply another reminder that international football leaves no room for almost? The truth is probably all of those things. Because great teams aren't built by collecting the best names. They're built by creating one shared purpose. Portugal had the players, they had the quality, they had the experience. What they never fully found was complete harmony. As for Cristiano Ronaldo, the World Cup dream is over. But the legacy will live far longer than any trophy ever could.